This is KB Howard, author of The Boy from Yesterday. I hope you're enjoying these final chapters of the story. If you have comments or questions, feel free to email me, kbhmsw@aol.com. Once again, that's kbhmsw@aol.com. And now, Chapter 38. Time to Go. Tom finally let go of his tight embrace of Laurel. She took a deep breath and wiped the rain from his face and his hair out of his eyes. "So," she said, and smiled cautiously. "So," he said, nodding, "are you okay?" Laurel nodded. She couldn't quite take in all that had just happened. She started to cry, to really lose it a second, but then knew they didn't have much time before the area would be chaos. She had to tell Tom goodbye. She had to let him go, and she wanted to remember the moment. She took a deep breath to stave off her tears. She put everything else that had just happened out of her mind and was focused solely on Tom, and the moment had finally come. They stood a moment, just taking each other in, not minding the rain pouring down around them and on them. "Are you okay?" Laurel said. Tom nodded, hesitatingly, like he wasn't completely sure. "Suddenly I feel like I'm looking at my own family album," Laurel said, with an awkward little laugh. "You're going to be back to be buddies with my great-great-grandfather. I've known that for a while now. It's just that now that it's time, it just seems odd to think about." She paused, her eyes welling up again as she continued to look at Tom, knowing that it would be for the last time. "What are you looking forward to? When you get back home, I mean?" she asked. "Well," Tom said, giving it some thought, "I sure won't look forward to chamber pots. The sooner my time gets those new indoor toilets installed, the better." They both laughed. Tom continued, "But you know, there aren't many scents in this time, except for the cars, I think. No chamber pots, thankfully, but no burning stoves either. No baking bread, really, except for your granny. No horse manure," Tom said, nodding in the direction of the street. "But oh boy, so much noise. In all my born days, I don't think I could ever get used to all that," Tom said. In thinking about their differences again, Laurel and Tom realized that they were from different worlds, and that it was time to say goodbye. Tom began to think of himself as older, as he was by a lot, and started to feel more paternal toward Laurel, thinking of her as the girl of future generations, and of himself as what this world would call part of the distant past. Something made him think of Mary Shiflett, that she was the one to be with, not this beautiful young girl from another time from his. Tom looked at Laurel through all of this when Laurel's eyes twinkled and perked up. "Hey," she said, her tone brighter, "I'm just curious. What have you learned here? I mean, really, with all the stuff we have now, what do you think Zeller was trying to help you understand?" Tom looked at the ground sheepish and silently gave a light shrug. "I don't know," he said, looking up and giving it some thought. And he looked at the sky. He saw the rain clouds parting, revealing a bright crescent moon again. "I don't know," he repeated. "I suppose it's that in every age there is stuff, as you call it. I still remember the first time I saw an electric light. Blazes, it wasn't that long ago for me, but everything here is just like that. Scientists, inventors, artists. I guess every age has its own. I think, well, if anyone ever asked you about people from our time, you would know more than them. But if anyone asked you, I reckon you can kind of tell them a lot, huh? I guess just tell them that you knew that, well, you'd guess that." He paused a moment, realizing his feelings for Laurel and how much he would miss her. "Tell them we loved, just like anyone else, that we were real people you can touch, who made mistakes, but made it all right some of the time, just the same. People had hopes that things like, well, all of this, really, would be possible someday. We couldn't ever imagine that it could ever be like this, I suppose, but we thought it would be something like it, something wild and fantastic. All your gadgets, and yet such beautiful people using them. Tom looked around and saw some bright street lights in the distance, and saw an intersection with no traffic in it, but the lights changed green, yellow, red, anyway. He took it all in and nodded. He smiled at the beauty of the glow of all the electric lights reflected on the wet pavement. I guess we thought it might be something like this. We couldn't know everything, of course, but maybe we hoped it would be something wonderful. Wonderful machines, different music, different clothes, beautiful things, lovely people, he said, touching Laurel's cheek gently with the back of his hand, admiring her face. And I reckon old Zeller was trying to get me to see that whatever happens, I can face it now. I wasn't quite ready to be a man, say, like my daddy was. Now I am. Not much choice, I guess. Whatever happens now, you just have to leave it to fate, I suppose. Well, Laurel grinned slightly. You kind of know what happens now. Tom laughed. I suppose so. Only this time, I want to be around to see it all happen, as it happened. That's something even you didn't get to see, long before you were born. You don't suppose that thing would let me visit, do you? Laurel asked, looking down at the ring. I don't know. I suppose I could ask. Not sure how many favors I can ask of old Zeller, though. He might be done with me after all this. He's a man of mysterious ways, that's for certain. He smiled as he looked deeply in her eyes. Your turn, he said. What have you learned from me? Well, Laurel said, I guess some things I knew before, but just better now. That love is timeless. That the people we didn't know, our ancestors, long before our own time, had feelings, they had minds, bodies like yours that were warm and moved and functioned. You see all these pictures growing up. You see them all in black and white in our history books or in museums, and it's like they aren't even real. But they are. They're not just names and dates on a tombstone. We get taught that they're like from some other place that doesn't matter. You've taught me that all of them mattered. All of them. You matter. She paused, trying to lighten things up for him. It's sure going to make American history class never the same again. Oh my God, what if I see pictures of you in textbooks or something? We didn't even look at those. You might already be in there. Well, Tom said, try to tell them to get my good side. Laurel laughed. You know what that is? Getting your good side in photos? Tom raised an eyebrow. Well, you know, I'm from the 19th century, not the Stone Ages. We had cameras. Nice ones, in fact. I had one from the store that took great photos. I had some of Sam, some of Mary, the girl He trailed off. They both were silent for an awkward moment. Laurel broke the silence. It's okay, really. I understand, she said. I might, Tom realized, and fished deep in the pocket of his vest that he hadn't worn in days. His eyes lit up. I do, he said as he retrieved a stiff cardboard photograph from deep inside the pocket. I picked this up a few days before our ride. My ride with Sam when all this happened. He thrust out his palm, beaming, showing Laurel the old photograph that looked new. The edges of the cardboard were sharp, and the image was stark and unfaded. It was a photo of Sam, no smile, but his dark eyes looking deep into the camera above his bushy mustache. That's him, Tom said. That's your grandpa. Well, many times grandpa, I suppose. Laurel took Tom's hand to see the photo in her left hand. As she tried to bring her right hand to it also, it wasn't there. Only her sleeve moved. Her arm and hand were invisible. They both noticed at the same time, and Laurel gasped. What's wrong? She said. I don't understand. You have the ring. It's fine. You're going home. Tom quickly put the photo back deep into his pocket. Laurel continued. You'd better go. Fast. But... She broke off, her voice breaking, fighting back her tears. Tom nodded, holding back his own tears. He put his hand on her shoulder, holding it firmly in his grip, like he wanted to remember what the fabric of her jacket felt like beneath his hand. "I'm here with you always," he said. He looked around, he looked up and saw the crescent moon again, brighter now with the storm clouds clearing away. "Remember, when you look up there, at that moon, any time, I'm right here. The moon don't change. That could be decades, hundreds of years ago, hundreds of years from now, and it doesn't change. See that? Whenever you see a moon, think of me." Laurel was crying too much now to say anything back. She and Tom embraced hard one last time. When they let go of each other, Laurel could finally talk again through her sniffles. But there wasn't much to say. They knew already. Laurel nodded and sniffed to clear her nose. "Are you ready?" Tom nodded back silently. He shrugged with a little smile and said, "No time like the present." Laurel smiled slightly and nodded her blessing. Tom took a deep breath, looked down at the ring, and twisted it on his finger once counterclockwise. He stood on his left foot and said, "Epi, Pepi, Kaki." The ring started to vibrate on his finger. He didn't tell Laurel that it was, but he could feel it. He twisted the ring counterclockwise again, one revolution. The ring vibrated harder now, and a low hum filled the air. He stood on his right foot and said, "Hillo, hollow, hello." He twisted the ring one last time. The ring was glowing now on his hand, and Laurel saw it now too, through her tears, and she smiled at seeing the ring finally starting to work. Tom stared into the glow of the jewel, which became brighter and brighter. As he gazed into its light, he was briefly transported in a dissociation deep into the ring's view, and saw a vision unfold, like he was watching TV back in Laurel's room. He became lost in a reverie, seeing deep past the red glow of the dragon's eye. He began to see the Chesterfield he knew of 1890. He saw himself running through the sunny field where someday the strip mall would be, racing toward the Beckons' house. Various visions flashed quickly in his gaze. He saw himself in Sam's bedroom, speaking to Sarah and explaining that he had been away visiting the next town over to consult a doctor there, getting instructions to keep the wound clean, and coming up with some excuse to visit Sam several times a day. He saw himself next to Sam's bed, opening the amber plastic bottle and fishing out the pink pills with his fingers, giving them to a reluctant and weakened Sam, while Tom looked over his shoulder to make sure Sarah wasn't looking, and giving Sam water to swallow them, holding the cup, as Sam was too weak to hold it. The scene flashed away, and Tom saw himself on the platform of the train station, speaking to Zeller, who was standing next to several packed trunks waiting to board the train. He could hear Zeller speak to him, watching himself as he looked up at Zeller. "I'm sorry I didn't get to see your show, sir," Tom said in the vision, awkwardly. "I believe you must have seen much more in the days since I've seen you," Zeller replied. "I suppose you're right, sir, but I did want to get to see your magic show," Tom said. "There is much magic to see, Tom, every day. More and more all the time, I should say. If we only look," Zeller said, checking his pocket watch. He clicked it shut and put it away, turning back to Tom. "Wouldn't you say young, man?" Zeller smiled in his dark eyes, giving more meaning to the words he said. Steam from the incoming train's engine enveloped the scene, and it faded away in the vision, clearing to see Tom at his house, back in Marguerite's kitchen, but it was as Tom knew it when it was his home, and he knelt down at the hot, burning cast-iron stove. He carefully opened the hot door to it with a cloth over his hand, and threw in the empty amber plastic prescription bottle with his other hand, and watched as the bottle curved and bent and melted away, with the label on it containing Marguerite's name and the drugstore logo shrinking and turning black, disappearing forever. Then he saw a vision of Sam, sitting up in bed, smiling and laughing again, and teasing Tom at something he said, looking stronger with color in his face. The images came faster now, of Sam's smiling face in the bed, which morphed into a slightly older-looking Sam standing next to Tom at a church altar. Sam was Tom's best man, dressed in a fine suit as Tom stood, also in a new suit, at the altar with Mary Shiflett in her wedding gown, beaming at Tom under her veil. Tom could see Mary's shining eyes. Then the vision shifted again, and Tom saw himself riding Chestnut up the same hill at sunset, with Sam quickly passing him on Blitzen and yelling "Yahoo!" as they both laughed and raced each other to the top of the hill again. Tom saw himself riding, feeling his body as if it were on the horse, when the vision faded, and he found himself feeling Laurel shaking his shoulder and urgently calling in his ear. "Tom!" she said, still fighting back tears. "You ready?" He snapped out of the vision and looked up at her. His eyes welled up again as he looked into hers, but he smiled resolutely. "Yes," he said. He planted both feet firmly on the ground. He still looked deep into Laurel's eyes, swallowed hard, and then forced out the words. She put her arms around him and held him tightly. He took one last breath and whispered in her ear, "Zizzy, Zuzzy, Zick!" The wind that had died down so much was suddenly back up in a strong gust as Laurel shut her eyes against the gale force that made them burn. The gust gently subsided, and she opened her eyes. She found herself hugging herself. Tom was gone. He had dissolved in the swirling wind like the sands of an hourglass. She let herself go and straightened up, as the wind was now only a light, cool evening breeze. Except for the breeze in the branch above, it was a calm, clear night, and all was quiet. In the distance, she faintly heard a siren again. This time they knew they were coming to the library tower. She knew once more, almost to make sure, that Tom was gone, and yet she knew he was. She looked up at the moon. She wanted to choke up again, but then she relaxed. She saw the glow of the eternal moon, the same crescent shape she and Tom had just shared a moment ago, and yet it felt like a lifetime. She felt alone, but she felt good. She wiped her eyes, her nose, and smiled. She turned and walked quickly away, farther out the back campus grounds. She knew instinctively exactly where she had to go now.